In this video, we're going to break down a mix of a song called Repeats by an artist called Maykar. But before we get started, my name is Ed, you're watching Stokes Sounds, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and leave a comment. And if you want to support the channel, head over to our website, stokessounds.com. Now let's dive in. So this track is an interesting one because they had already kind of had a production mix of it, you know, they were happy with it, and they came to me and they just wanted the kind of the finishing touches, a bit like when mixers go to mastering engineers and they just want that extra kind of 5%. And so they just wanted to have my kind of mixed opinion on the mix that they already had, and you know, how could I improve it and how could I make it better. And the trick with this sort of mix, it's all about what you don't do more so than what you do, if that makes sense. It's that kind of thing of, you know, people don't pay me to mix a song because of how many plugins I'm using. They're paying me because of my expertise and my ears, and I know when to do something and I know when to not do something. So let's actually just check out the track that we're working with itself, and I'll break down kind of my thought process and why I did what I did with this mix. But I thought it'd be interesting because it's quite a simple mix, yet there's also quite a lot of technical elements in it as well. So yeah, let's check out the song.
Good loving, let this song be a rotation. Put this song on repeat. Come on, I don't go retreat. Make I give you some multivitamin that your body been craving. Put this song on repeat. As I caress your body, giving you that good loving. Let this song be a rotation. Put this song on repeat. Come on, I don't go retreat. Make I give you some multivitamin that your body been craving.
So it's a great track, great production. The guys did a great job at kind of putting this record together, and it was a real pleasure to mix. Now, if we actually just look at the kind of the first thing, my previous video, I've already spoken about the mix bus, so I won't go into detail with that. But the way that I kind of set up my Pro Tools session is I have the mix bus at the top, and then you'll see here I've got kind of blue tracks here, which are the VCA faders in Pro Tools. And if I mute that, it gives me the instrumental. If I mute the acapella, it gives me the acapella. So it does the opposite to what the, you know, the titles are saying that it does. And this is just means at the end of the mix I can just quickly do a cappella TV mixes, instrumentals and all of that great stuff just super quickly. So that's why I have it set up there. Then I have an all stems auxiliary, and this is where kind of, well, an all stems folder, and this is where all of the audio tracks go into the folder again, so I can print separate things if they want a lead vocal stem only and an ad lib and a BV stem all separate. I can give them that as well. Then the way that I work, so all of the music is separate to the vocals. So what would happen is let's say they want the vocals up 1 dB. It just means I can go to the all vocal bus, turn it up 1 dB, and it just makes life a lot easier, you know, in that kind of situation. So that's kind of why I do that. So all of the music goes to an all instrumental bus, and then all of the vocals, including kind of delay throws, anything to do with vocal related stuff, will go into the all vocal bus. And you can see kind of when I close the session down, you'll see it's quite simple. They're just in 2 folders, and it also means I can process just the vocals and I can process just the music. So it's a really good thing to be able to do. Now, if we just take a look, you'll see that it's very minimal on plugins. There is not, you know, much going on. You can see that, you know, I have stuff in my template, but, you know, everything's kind of faded out, which means the plugins are inactive, because it just didn't need it. And it's one of these songs where, this is why I thought it'd be great to show you this, because it's one of these songs where it didn't need much to bring it to that kind of final finish line. Is also very easy to kind of completely ruin the mix by adding things that are just not needed. I wasn't trying to put my signature on this track. I was just trying to make the track better and for the team to feel like I gave them that little bit better of a percentage than what they had it at to begin with. So we've got a little bit of that going on. So if we just take a look at the actual elements, we've got the drum bus. All of the drums go into the drum bus, which I've called drum group. And, you know, let's just go through the actual track itself kind of one by one, and we can hear, you know, what it is that we've got. So, you know, very simple, you know, great sounding kind of stems, you know, the kick sounds good, I didn't need to replace it. If we take a look at what I've got on the kick going on, I've got some EQ, just rolling off some low end, just to kind of take the rumble out. I'm using some split EQ just to change the transient of the kick. I wanted to punch through a little bit more. I'm using some Spectre just for it to cut through on smaller systems. And then I'm just using some compression just to kind of control the peaks of the kick and just to kind of flatten it a little bit, reduce the dynamic range, just so it's a little bit more controlled before it goes into the drum bus. And you know, just an overview of everything. I'm not doing too much at all. If I just take the plugins off and bring them in one by one, you'll hear what it's doing. You heard there, when I bring in that split EQ, it's adding a lot of thump. It's adding a lot of kind of bottom in that 60 hertz. It's kind of really punching through. And that's kind of what I wanted, especially in this kind of music. You know, it's all about the percussive. It's about the kick and the snare going ta, 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 ta. So it's really important that, you know, that feels and you're grooving to that. You kind of feel it. So that, you know, it was important to get the transients right on that kind of percussive element, in this case, the kick. Snare wise, that rim shot, again, using split EQ, you can see that, again, around kind of 1K area, I'm just boosting it, and that's just to get it to cut through. And then I'm just doing some saturation. And this is, again, just to kind of bring it a bit more forward and a little bit kind of more dirtier, I guess is the word to use. And it just enables it to cut through the mix better. And then I'm just doing some final kind of subtractive EQ just to kind of control, again, peaks or certain frequencies, or, you know, resonant frequencies that were, you know, annoying me. So if we have a listen, you know, with these plugins off and on, you'll hear kind of what they're doing one by one. So again, very, very subtle, not much going on at all. And then we've got kind of another snare going on. Again, it's like a little fill. What are these? Toms, some claps. You know, and you'll see, like on the tom, all I'm doing is just taking out some low end. I'm not adding anything. That's the thing. You know, a lot of people, I think, get really hooked up on, you know, I've got an EQ, I've then got to go do some crazy moves in this EQ, or I've got to, you know, add this, add that. And actually, a lot of times, less is more. Just get the perfect balance. It's all about the fundamentals. Your faders, your panning, and just kind of leveling. That's kind of what mixing is, you know. And I've said this before in other videos. You get that, and you're like 90% of the way there anyway. And again, I'm not doing anything on any of these percussive elements. I'm doing something on the percussion 4, I've called it. I believe it's a shaker. Just controlling some resonant frequencies, and then another percussion element. Again, more resonant frequencies, and a shaker just taking out some low end. So there really is not much going on at all. The whole drum group together. So what did I do on the drum group? I just did some overall EQ, just taking out, again, some resonant frequencies that I just feel like were just annoying me, things that I was just hearing on the day that I didn't like. I've got some Spectre EQ, just adding a little bit of brightness to the overall drums. This would have probably been something I would have done kind of later on in the mix, where I felt like the drums were a bit kind of dark and I wanted to kind of open them up. And the way that I like to open drums up is a little bit by saturation or EQ. In this case, I use Spectre, and I'm just kind of boosting around 10K up, you know, less than 1 dB, but it's just adding a little bit of lift. And that's really making the hi-hats, the rim shots, the snares, and the, you know, all of the kind of the percussion elements, the higher end frequency percussive elements kind of boost up a little bit, and it's just adding that final touch that I like. Then I go into the standard clip. Now the standard clip, again, is just to control kind of transients and peaks before it hits kind of other areas in my mixing session. The limiter, most of the time, just controlling it so I can get things a little bit louder. But if we have a look, I'm probably doing 0.5 dB. You can see here, I'm just shaving off those transients where it's red. Last thing, you'll see that I've got a sidechain going out of bus 42. I'm not a huge sidechain fan, as some people will know, but I have been using the Jason Joshua technique of sidechaining the bottom end, the bass, to the kick and making it really kind of cut through. So that's what I've done there. Now, if we have a look, we've got some transitions on the transitions group. Again, I didn't do anything to these. They've not been touched, just leveled. Then after that, I've then got my bass group. Bass group, not much is happening either. I'm using a compressor just to control it. The voice of God on one area of the synth, if we have a listen. Basically, when it's played in a club on big speakers, it's just going to add that little energy, like oomph, around that kind of 40 to 30 hertz area. And in this kind of music, especially in kind of pop music as well, you don't necessarily want all of that in there. But, you know, in this kind of music, I felt like it kind of worked well. So I kept it in there. You'll see on the sub here, we've got two basses going on that are working together. So we've got like a really low sub, and then we've got kind of a mid-range kind of bass pad. Like a sub bass. Again, I'm just doing some compression. I'm not doing anything. I believe I originally did add the voice of God on these, and a revision came back and they said that they really liked the way that the bass was already cutting through in the mix. And, you know, and I said to him, I said, fine. I said, you know, I'm not one of these mixers that I have to stamp on something. I just, you know, if you're happy, I'm happy. You know, there's technical elements where I think maybe we should do this, and I will advise on where to go with it. But on the whole, at the end of the day, it's about vibe, and it's about what the person who's asking me to mix the track, what they're wanting. And if you can deliver what they're wanting as a mixer, you're going to get hired more, and people are going to want to work with you more. So you've got to think about all of that sort of stuff as well. You know, I will always give my opinion and what I think it should be, but again, there is no right or wrong in mixing. So it's, you know, push and pull a little bit on certain areas, but they said to me that they really liked the way that the bottom end was sitting in their rough mix. So I said, okay, fine. So again, I did very minimal stuff. Voice of God, a bit of compression, it's all it needed. And then these all then feed to a bass group, or the bass bus, some people call it. And on here, really in this mix, I'm doing a lot of controlling on the groups. And on here, again, I'm just doing a high cut, high pass filter around 19 hertz, again, because I want it to sound good on multiple systems, and I don't want all of that low end. I want it to be controlled, so I felt like I needed to control it a little bit. And then I'm then using the Pro MB, which I always use kind of on my bottom end, and that is just kind of multi-band compression up to around 250 hertz, and it's just controlling it. I mean, it's hardly doing anything. If we play that with the drum groups, you can hear what the Soothe is doing. Again, just controlling that really low end frequency that just, you know, is very easy to have the mix muddy up. Then after that, we then go into the synths. Again, I'm not doing too much on the synths either. Some EQ, just to take out some low end. Again, the rumble that's just not needed. Some split EQ, just to add a little bit of transient around 400. This is just kind of the nice area of the harmonic sound of that instrument. It was just there, and I wanted to poke through a little bit, so I'm just cutting it through the mix. And then again, as I said earlier about the fundamentals, about kind of panning and stereo widening and all of that, I'm just making it a little bit wider, just because I felt like the symphony needed to be a bit wider in the mix. That was just kind of my opinion, and I went with it. So if we ever listen with these plugins off, and then I'll bring them in on one by one, you'll hear kind of what they're doing. They're just complementing each other, doing another split EQ just a little bit higher up, around 1K instead of 400. Again, that's just where that harmonic tone of that kind of sound was sitting to me, so I just boosted it around there just to give it a little bit of clarity, a little bit of top end, and just make it again poke through the mix. Again, I felt like some of the sounds were a little bit digital, and you get that kind of digital sounding effect, especially on kind of software synthesizers and all of that sort of stuff. You know, you've got plugins like Serum, Native Instruments, they're all fantastic things, but sometimes you get this kind of digital sound in the mix where you kind of miss the analog sound. So by taking away some of the harshness up the top, that kind of metallic sound. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't, but I just felt in this case I wanted to take it out because it felt like it didn't really need it. If we have a listen with them two together. Then there's a flute. Again, you know, I didn't do anything to that. I just put it up 1.8 dB. That's the thing. Don't feel like you always have to add things. And then we've got another synth. What's going on here? So again, this is just kind of a lower end synth. Again, just taking out some rumble. Didn't do anything to the actual synth itself as far as additive. Everything is subtractive. Again, I've got this synth going on. Didn't do anything to that. Got another synth. Again, just taking out some low end, some muddiness. Sounds like a guitar to me, but I put it in the synths, don't know why, but very, very minimal stuff again. We then got the strings. Again, they're just kind of thickening the mid-range of the music. Again, had an EQ, but I didn't do anything. I added some mid-range using Spectre. You probably get the point. I'm doing very, very minimal things, but a lot of these minimal things add up and it's giving that extra 2% that they were after. That's the kind of my way of thinking when I'm mixing. Got some horns going on. Looks like they were from Contact. EQ, taking out some bottom end, adding some width. Again, not much going on. Then after that, we then got the electric guitar. Taking out some EQ, some bottom end that it didn't need. Compressing it ever so slightly. You can see on the waveform that it is slightly compressed anyway. But I just wanted to add that little bit just to, again, control it. As you saw there, max 1 dB, and then we've got a guitar underneath, and I just used similar settings. Took out a little bit more low end here. Again, we listen to them two together. And then you'll see on the guitar bus, I've got some multi-band. This is, again, just controlling that kind of low mid-range, anything that's going to sound a little bit boxiness and muddy up the mix. Plucky sound up at the top, and then we just got some EQ again. This looks to me like I would have done this again towards the end of the mix, where I just felt there was just a little bit too much mud in that electric guitar, especially when all the other instruments came in. And you can see I've done it on a dynamic mode here, and that's just because it was only on certain sections where that was happening. I didn't want to just, you know, take it out over the whole thing. So that's what's going on there. I believe that is it for the instruments. So if we just, you know, have all the instruments in together. So sounding great to me, sounds leveled, sounds pleasant, sounds nice. I did some slight EQing, again, would have been something towards the end of the mix when the vocals were in on the instrumental, you know, 258 Hertz, 64 Hertz, 3.8K. Again, I'm doing half a dB, 0.7 of a dB, and less than half a dB, 0.4 of a dB. So it just goes to show how minimal that I'm doing. These things, as I say, do make a difference. And this is all about training your ears, understanding what, you know, works within what context you have. So, you know, where is the placement of that kick with the bass? How is that affecting the mid-range of the electric guitars? You know, all of that sort of stuff. You know, do I keep the electric guitars kind of center and then pan out the synths just to, again, create that stereo image? You know, people always talk about this 3D effect. They are techniques that I use to kind of get that depth and that control in the mix. We then got vocals. Now, vocals seems to be one that everyone seems to kind of want to know about. I keep my vocals pretty simple, to be honest. You know, de-esser, EQ, compressor, some tonal shaping, maybe some multi-band, and then maybe some final adjustment of EQ. Again, just keeping it very, very simple. These guys, they know how to record vocals. They know how to produce. They know, you know, so I'm very lucky in that sense that, you know, I'm being given good source material to work with. So I'm not doing a lot of fixing. We just actually have a listen to the vocal itself with all of my processing on. You'll hear kind of how it sounds in a cappella.
Beat as I caress your body, giving you that good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know go retreat. Make I give you some multivitamin that your body been craving. Put this song on repeat as I caress your body, giving you that good, good loving. Let this song be your rotation.
So you can hear, you know, it sounds great. So the first thing that I'm doing, you know, I've got other videos about this, you know, again, you know, cleaning up the vocal. So go back and check my RX video. That was a video where I kind of break down in detail how I do all my vocal editing before I kind of add these plugins I'm about to show you. So definitely go and watch that, worth watching, because you'll really understand kind of how to get vocals super clean, especially in the kind of modern era of music where they kind of have to be. So first up, I then have a de-esser. De-esser, I'm just controlling the S's, the T's, and all of that sort of stuff. Now I did a little bit in the RXing, but now I'm just doing some overall de-essing, again, just to control it a little bit more. So if we just bypass the other plugins on this chain and we just have a look at the de-esser on and off.
As I caress your body, giving you that good, good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know go retreat.
Very, very subtle stuff. Then we go into some Pro Q4, just some EQ. Again, I was talking earlier about having that digital kind of sound, and sometimes that can happen on vocals, so I felt like I wanted to take it off there as well. I just made it a bit warmer, a bit more vintagey, and just sounded better to my ear. Again, taking out some low end, some mid-range, that kind of harshness around 3K, 6K kind of mark. Sometimes I boost at 6K, between 6 and 8K, just to make the vocal more present, but these vocals seemed like it was on quite a bright mic, and the vocalist just has quite a bright tone as well, so I didn't really need to do much kind of additive in that case.
As I caress your body, giving you that good, good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know go retreat.
So you can see it's just kind of cleaning up the vocal a little bit and getting it to sit better. I've got the virtual mix rack, and on this I'm just adding high end. I'm kind of going back on my word. I did add high end around 15K. This was probably a move that I did again towards the end of the mix where I felt like I needed that vocal brighter. For whatever reason, things change within the mix. You're, you know, different gain staging all the time, different movements, different, you know, things coming in, and sometimes you might EQ a vocal in solo and then you listen to it with the music and you have to readjust it, and, you know, back and forth. So, you know, that's kind of why I would have done that. Again, if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
As I caress your body, giving you that good, good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know go retreat.
So again, it's not doing too much of a difference, very subtle. Then we go into a Waves CLA 76 compressor, which is, you know, an emulation of an 1176. I've gone for the Bluey. It sounded good to me. It has a tone, adds a bit of treble to the vocal, so I used it. You know, fastest released mid-attack, you know, around 10 o'clock. Again, still letting the transient of the original vocal through, so I'm not kind of killing it with the compressor, but, you know, it's enough to control it. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
As I caress your body, giving you that good, good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know go retreat. Make I give you some multivitamin that your body been craving.
This plugin just sounds commercial, and what I mean by that is we're so used to hearing that kind of 1176 sound on a vocal that you stick it on and you're suddenly familiar with it. You know, and Waves did a great job emulating that, so, you know, I used it. Then I go into one of my favorite plugins of all time, the RVox. Again, I've mentioned this in videos before. I don't know what this plugin does behind the scenes, but it does something magical, and there isn't a plugin out there that does it. It just makes that vocal come forward. You know, a lot of people ask me, you know, how do I get that kind of pop vocal? How do I get the vocal to really sit forward in the mix and be really nice to the ear and crisp and up front and sounds lovely? It's called RVox. A good vocalist with a good recording setup, recorded nicely, bit of EQ, you know, bit of taming of the EQ, bit of brightness, bit of compression, and then just stick an RVox on and you're kind of there, to be honest. So if we ever listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
As I caress your body, giving you that good, good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know go retreat.
It's amazing. It just sounds great. And then I just finished off the chain with some multiband compression, and that's just kind of controlling the singer. You know, it's quite a fast moving track. Although it's staying on a similar range as far as octave goes in the vocals, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of transients in the words, and I just wanted to control the T's, all of that sort of stuff, and also the kind of the low end, when there's any plosives and all of that sort of stuff. I did de-plosive a lot of things in this. There was a lot of vocal editing behind the scenes before I did the mix. With this, I just wanted to control that even more, because when I've done all the cleaning in RX and then I'm applying more plugins like EQs, 1176s, RVox, you kind of ruin the work you've already done, but you bring up more things that could have been taken out. So this is just kind of my controller plugin that I like to call it, and that's just kind of controlling where the vocal is sitting in the mix. So if we ever listen with this on and off, you already hear what it's doing.
As I caress your body, giving you that good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. I know give you some multivitamin that your body been craving.
So you can just really hear what that's doing, and you can see that how I break it up. I've got kind of hook, verse 1, pre, and they're all kind of separated, and that's because sometimes I'll do a different EQ move depending on where it is in the song. I don't think I did anything different in this case, but sometimes I will take back off the compression depending on how it was recorded, but these guys did a great job to begin with, so again there wasn't too much for me to do. All of these are then copy and paste down with minor adjustments if needed, and then they go to a lead vocal bus, and on the lead vocal bus I am doing kind of some overall EQ. Again, this would be just to fit it in that mix just that little bit better. Did feel like there was a lot of kind of low mid-range, like the singer was very close to the mic and I wanted the singer to be a little bit further back. Now the RVox is a bit contradicting because it makes vocals sound forward, but there's a difference between making vocals sound forward and making vocals sound like they're like right here, where it's like annoying. So it's that battle of how much do you bring the vocal forward to how much is it just annoying to back off. And in this case I wanted the vocals to be quite forward, but I also wanted them to kind of back off in certain areas, which is why I've got it on dynamic. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what this is doing.
As I caress your body, giving you that good loving. Let this song be on rotation. Put this song on repeat. Make I give you some multivitamin that your body been craving. Put these as I caress.
So again, they're just frequencies, just certain ones that were resonating, which I just took out. And then just to kind of finish off the vocal chain altogether, I just add the standard R compressor. Again, just doing very minimal stuff, just controlling a certain bits of dynamics, so there's not too much automation.
As I caress your body, giving you that good loving. Let this song be on rotation.
Doing like 0.3 of a dB, if that. And you can see up here I am doing some automation on the vocal, just bringing it up in certain sections where it needs to be. Again, very, very simple stuff. Automation is one of those things that I think a lot of people do less of because they're compressing so much, but when you automate properly, it can make all the difference. It can make a good mix sound great. So think of it in small kind of micro steps to get things to sound amazing. Then as far as vocal effects goes, I've just got like a doubler. The way that I have my vocal effects set up here is I go to a vocal effects folder. Micro shift would just been a little micro shift. I've done this a lot in previous videos, so I won't kind of go through it in more detail in this one. Then I've got a plate reverb going on, and the plate reverb is what we've got going on for the plate, the classic EMT 140, and then we've got a Procasti going on, which I believe is probably the Seventh Heaven. Maybe it's not, it was. And then I took it away and used the standard Valhalla vintage vibe. That's like a £500 plugin over a 50 quid plugin. It's mad, the difference in price. However, they're both, great plugins, but Valhalla vintage vibe for its price, the whole Valhalla kind of Valhalla, I don't know how you say it, I think it's Valhalla. The whole Valhalla plugin packages and everything they do, they are super cheap, super good value for money. I'm surprised they're not more expensive, to be honest. Hopefully they don't get more expensive after this video, but they are super cheap and super amazing. And I know plenty of guys that have had a lot of hit records and they've been using these plugins on them. They'll choose a 50 quid one over a more expensive one. So at the end of the day, it's about the ears, person doing it more so than about the tools that we're using. Don't blame your tools. And then I'm doing some EQ on that reverb, and then I've got a 1/8 delay. I don't know what I'm doing on that 1/8 delay. Again, Valhalla delay, not doing much. quarter note delay, probably another Valhalla one. Quarter note, again, not doing much. Oh, and I got a dual delay. This is quite a good one. So this is a 1/8 on one side and a 1/8 dotted on the other, and it's kind of creating this kind of movement, this bounce. I like to do that a lot. Some people don't, I do. It sounds good to my ears, so I use it. So that's kind of all the effects, and you'll hear that I've got them automated. So I believe I've got the dual coming on muted. It's only coming on in the verses. It's coming off in everywhere else, which is actually quite unusual. I don't know why I did that. Normally it would be the opposite on choruses, but maybe because the choruses had more vocals, so that's kind of why I did it there. So if we have a listen,
Craving, exquisite. This is what you are. Lay you down so softly.
so that answers the question. I know exactly why I did that there. It was because the phrasing of the lyrics were like in half time to the verse. So because they're in half time to the verse, I wanted a bit more of a bigger delay, and I had a bit more movement to create more movement within the mix. So everything is very musical. I mix in a musical way. You know, it's very technical, but it's also, you've got to know about music as well. I think the best mixers, in my opinion, they have a sense of musicality, of actual kind of a musician, as well as being technical, because they understand certain areas of the song. They understand eighths, quarter notes. You know, if you've got a fast song, maybe do it in eighths. If you've got a really slow song, maybe do it in quarter notes. So it's about kind of understanding that and getting that vibe. So that's kind of what I did for the lead vocal. The ad-libs would be treated the same kind of plugins. Again, nothing different. Apart from on the ad-libs, I just had an even longer Valhalla vintage verb with a longer pre-delay. Again, that was just so the vocal, the ad-libs were kind of a bit more kind of finessing out, if that's the right word to use. And then after the ad-libs, you can see we've got some harmonies going on, and the harmonies, again, you can see that they're quite dynamic. So what I did is I did do a little bit of clip gain where needed, but I just threw on a de-esser just to keep the consistency between each kind of S. Multiple S's into a de-esser sounds different to individual S's into a de-esser. So because it's like a compression, the way the plugin works is in a way like a compressor. It all depends on how much is going into it. I like to do the de-essing on separate channels instead of as a group. And then after that, I did some EQ, similar EQ, and then some compression. I didn't do the whole vocal chain on these because I didn't feel like it needed it. And these are just hard pan left and right. If we have a listen to the ad-libs on their own. So again, I just decided to use some SSL channel. What did I do on the lead? I think I don't even think I used the channel strip on the lead. So I just felt to change it up a little bit, use some SSL channel strip, had the old 8K of brightness, doing a little bit of compression. Again, just to tame the transients of the vocal. Again, just controlling it. Then I decided to use a Fairchild compressor by UAD, the legacy version. Again, it has this brightness, it has this tone. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what that's doing. It's doing quite a lot. It's adding quite a bit of gain. But it's felt right to me, so it sounded good. Then I'm adding some spectator, again adding some mid-range to the BVs. Sometimes if you don't want, if you brighten up the lead vocal, you don't necessarily want your backing vocals to be super bright unless you're like Mariah Carey. But kind of adding some mid-range back into the backing vocals can really thicken up the way that the vocals kind of are delivered in the mix itself. So I do like to add a bit more mid-range to the backing vocals than I would do with the lead vocals. So that's what I've done there. So if we have a listen with that on and off, you'll hear what it's doing. Again, not much going on. Did some extra EQ. I just felt like, you know, it needed a bit more controlling. I won't show that because it's similar to what we've already done. And then I did some more compression. Again, probably doing 1 dB. A little bit more on that one, but again, similar kind of thing. And then I did feel like there was kind of a big build up of S's because de-essed individually, but then when you've got like 20 backing vocals all going to a backing vocal bus, the S's can still build up. So I just wanted to tame that a little bit. If you have a listen to the actual frequency that I'm taming. just that sort of stuff that's just not pleasant to the ear. So that's just being tamed a couple of dB. And that's it for the harmonies. And you know, you can see I'm using similar effects, micro shifters I've already gone through, the plate reverb and the percussive, which we all know was the Valhalla reverb. And then on this one, I'm just using a bit of quarter note. If we have a listen with what the quarter note sounds like.
Multivitamin, this is what you...
So again, that's just for vibe. It was just to fill it out. You can see that there's space and gaps between the way that the backing vocals were in the hook. So again, it's just adding that kind of movement, which goes back to the whole musicality thing that I said earlier. And that's basically the mix, apart from, you know, the mix bus. And there was one extra thing. I did add some throws, which I like to do a lot actually in my mixes. And again, it's just adding kind of nice kind of movement again in the mix. If we have a listen to the throw one. And that's just H delay, quarter note, ping pong, and I wanted to put it into another reverb, again Valhalla vintage verb, but into a concert hall, into the color of 1980s instead of the 1970s, I believe it is. So again, just to change it up. If you have a listen with that in the mix, you'll hear what that's doing in verse 1.
We don't yarn, we don't talk. I day on your vibe, you focus and you day on your grind, you don't want distraction.
So you can hear again, it's adding some nice kind of ear candy stuff to the mix. We got another one here, which is an Echo Boy half note this time, again in some Valhalla. I used 1970s in this case, again to change it up.
They're restless around me. What? They're restless around me. Why you dip it like that on me? Body no be firewood, make you move closer.
So you heard it there. It's very, very subtle, and that's just in the pre-choruses. And that was it really. I didn't do anything else. I did a couple of extra bits on this second pre-chorus just to change it up.
Today, professional singer, singing keys from A to the Z, B to the C, C to the D, D to the E, and F to the G.
That was printed on their stems, that effect. That was what they liked. And, you know, just to finish up the vocals, they then go into the all vocal bus. I'm using something similar to this, like Soothe, but Waves version. It was quite a cool plugin, just taking out kind of certain harshness in the overall vocals together.
Today, professional singer, singing keys from A to the Z, B to...
Tell you what, I'll take all of the plugins off and we'll go through one by one.
Today, professional singer, singing keys from A to the Z, B to the C, C to the D, D to the E, and F to the G.
This Fresh Air plugin by Slate is, again, it's like a secret weapon. Probably not a secret weapon in the industry, but I don't know what they've done, but Slate have done an amazing job. You just put this on the vocal and it just sounds like pop. You know, if you want something to kind of hit hard, sound good, sound nice and crispy, and sound like, I guess, Mariah Carey, or I don't know, someone that's of that kind of similar characteristics of voice, or even as I'm using in this case on a male voice, it just adds this like 10 to 16k kind of boost of air, and it just makes things just sound pleasant. So I like it. And I've gone to some tape, virtual mix rack, sorry, not virtual mix rack, virtual tape machines. I use this on the mix bus. Again, I've already done a video about that, but this one is just, again, adding some of that bottom mid-range that I like what it does to the vocal. If you have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
Today, professional singer, singing keys from A to the Z, B to the C, C to the D, D to the E, and F to the G.
It's kind of like bringing the vocals a little bit more kind of forward, but in like the bottom end, so it just adds a nice kind of frequency of sound to the ear, to the vocal, which I like. Probably the wrong word to use, but it sounds good to me. And then I then go into the Pro MB. Again, this is like my multi-band finisher that I use on all vocals, and it's where I control the low end and I control the high end. You know, I've added a lot of fresh air from that plugin, a lot of high end, and then I've added a lot of kind of tape saturation from the virtual tape machine, which is the kind of the bottom mid-range I just explained a second ago, and that is kind of obviously increasing the balance of all of the vocals. It's making them a little bit brighter and a little bit kind of more bass heavy. And so I then go into a multi-band as like kind of my taming plugin, just kind of bouncing through as he's singing, it's just kind of balancing it out and just kind of, I guess, massaging it into the music. So if we have a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
Today, professional singer, singing keys from A to the Z, B to the C, C to the D, D to the E, and F to the G.
And then, as I say, I've just got my mix bus chain, which is virtual tape machine. EQ, just take out some low end, bit of smiley face going on, some compression. I had it, you know, there's a lot of transients in this song, so I had it, you know, on the fastest release, slowest attack, just to allow those transients to cut through. Again, probably doing max 3 dB. Again, doing some EQ on the mono section, just didn't want to do overall EQ, just certain things in the mid-range in the mono section of the mix I felt could, you know, be sorted out. Then I do some ozone, and I've just got some kind of high-end tape saturation going on, and I'm controlling some dynamics as well, again across the mix, kind of just to balance everything out again. And then after that, I then go into a clipper, again probably doing 1 or 2 dB. And then into the Oxford inflator, and then into my final limiter, and I'm probably hitting around -9. It does hit -8 as the song goes on, but it kind of felt right to me. It's not all about being super loud, it's also about kind of being musically loud and what works for the song, and this works for the song, so I went with it. One cool little trick that I did do, which I do sometimes, depends on the arrangement of the production that comes in, but I will boost the hooks up a little bit, so it's at 3.7 and then the verses are at 4.2. Now people are probably thinking, why am I not starting my master bus on 0? Now the reason why is because in Pro Tools I use the master fader as my mix bus, and a lot of people don't, but I don't know why they don't, but I do it because I like the way that I can just trim the audio going into my mix bus without having to use a trim plugin or take everything down. It just seems obvious to me. If everything's just too loud going into your master bus, just turn one fader down. I don't have to turn multiple faders down, VCA faders down. It's just one fader, turn it down, and I can gain stage in 2 seconds. You know, I look at my tape up here, I go, okay, I want everything to be around 0. So I balance the mix, get everything around 0, and if it's, you know, hitting over a lot of overs, if 1 or 2 overs, it's fine. But if it's constantly slammed at like +3 VU and it's going mental, I just trim it down, and that's what I did in this case. So I think people should actually use if you're in Pro Tools, use the Pro Tools Master Fader. A lot of people don't like to do it because they don't want the kind of the movement of the audio going into the plugins different if they're doing what I'm doing. You can see I am lifting it up, so it's hitting these plugins at slightly different volumes. But to be completely honest with you, when you're talking half a dB of volume difference, your plugins are just not going to be affected to the human ear, in my opinion. And I think that, you know, well, fight me on it in the comments if you want, but I just think it's such small changes, and actually I like the movement of how the audio is backing off from the plugins, and then I can drive the plugins. So it's also a taste thing. You know, there are times, of course, where you don't want that, but I do think that it can add kind of a nice bit of kind of movement to the mix by doing it within the plugins being affected as well. But that's just my take on it. Everyone's different. Everyone has their own kind of ways of mixing, but there is no right or wrong. So, you know, go with what you like. And that's it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. As I said, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. I love hearing from you guys, you know, talking about mixing and all of that great stuff. So do make sure that you leave them in the comments below. And I'll see you all again next week for another video.